Friends, today we are going to study about ecological adaptations in the plants. In this chapter, we have to study the different structural changes which the plants they develop in their bodies morphologically and anatomically or internally. Now, these structural changes thus developed in the plants morphologically and anatomically internally in the bodies, these changes are permanent, and these permanent changes help these plants to live there, to multiply there, to grow there. That is, these changes helps the plants to grow luxuriantly at those places where the plants are growing. So such structural changes which are permanent and which helps the plant to grow there, to multiply there, to live there, to reproduce there, these permanent structural changes in morphology and internal structure, they are called as adaptations. They are called as adaptations. Now we are visualizing over here ecological adaptations. Ecology means according to the surrounding. How is the availability of water? How much is the temperature at those habitats? How much is the light intensity, wind velocity? So these are the ecological conditions. How is the soil? What is the content of the soil? So as per these available conditions, these plants growing at those places, they develops such changes which suits means which matches with the present conditions, present availability. And these changes, these structural features thus present in these plants are permanent and they help them to grow there nicely. Such changes, such permanent structural changes in morphology and internal structure, we call them as ecological adaptations. For example, principally we find the plants growing either on the land or there in the water. Suppose the land habitats, if we observe, the land habitat shows variations in the ecological composition. For example, the dry habitat like the deserts, they shows different ecological situation. Now, the field conditions like our regions, the field conditions they shows different ecological features, the soil condition, temperature condition, water availability, wind velocity. At the field conditions, it is different from the deserts. Now, suppose let us visualize about the aquatic habitats, water habitats. Certain plants grow in the water, either in the fresh water or marine water, and these aquatic habitats, the plants growing in such aquatic habitat, they show different ecological conditions. The dissolved nature of the nutrients in the water and the water currents, the wavy action of the water, the temperature of the water, intensity of the light present in the water body. These are the ecological features of the aquatic habitats. And as per the ecological situation, these plants growing in the aquatic habitat, aquatic environment, they shows certain structural changes in them. These structural changes which enables the plant to grow there nicely, beautifully, these structural changes are called as the ecological adaptations. So this is about what we have to discuss in this chapter. Now let us visualize about some more about ecological adaptations. So this is about the definition. The modifications in the structure of organisms to survive successfully in an environment are called as adaptations of the organisms. The adaptations helps the organisms to exist under prevailing means present condition, present availability of the ecological habitat. Habitat means what type of soil is there, how are the nutrients, how much is the light intensity, how much is the temperature, how is the wind velocity, So these are the ecological features present in that habitat. Habitat means a place where the plant is growing. So this is about the ecological adaptations. Now, the plants have adaptations to help them to survive. So, as we have discussed over here, this is the illustration of what are the ecological adaptations. So, we have already discussed it. Now, the based upon the habitat, there are the different ecological groups of the plants. For example, certain plants are called as hydrophytes. There is one group of the plant called hydrophytes. The plants growing in the water or water-rich soils at very wet places, they are called hydrophytes. Now, certain plants they grows in the dry habitat, for example, deserts, dry soils, mountainy and rocky places is where the moisture traces, water traces in the soil, or the substratum it is minimum, or there is scarcity of moisture in the soil or substratum. The plants are called as xerophytes. Now, certain plants they grows in a moderate habitat. For example, the field conditions, our mango, for example, the crops, these are called as mesophytes. Mesophytes. Now, certain plants they grows upon the other plants. We call them as epiphytes. Epi means upon, phytes means the plants. Plants which grows upon the other plants. For example, Cuscuta is there, Loranthus is there, different orchids are there. They grows on the other plants. So we call them as epiphytes. Now, besides the epiphytes, there are certain plants. They are called as halophytes. 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 This is a very peculiar group of the plants which grows in salty water or where the concentration of the salts in the soil it is more. For example, a certain plant grows in the salty water of the oceans or estuaries, lagoons. These plants are called as halophytes at the places where the concentration of the different salts, sodium chloride, sulfates, magnesium, and particularly the sodium chloride and sulfate, it is more, calcium is more, the soils are alkaline, the made water is very salty, saline. Such plants growing in such salty water, they are called halophytes. Now, beside the aquatic halophytes, for example, plants growing in the along the bank, along the oceans, estuaries, where the tidal coast is there, the plants are called as halophytes, wetland halophytes. For example, in West Bengal, there is a Sundarban forest of the mangrove plants, which grows in the salty water of the ocean along the coast, where the estuaries areas are there, where the river meet to the ocean. At those places, these plants they grow. We call them as wetland or aquatic halophytes. Now, besides the aquatic halophytes, certain plants they grows in dry soils where dry habitats where the concentration of the salts in the soil it is more. For example, your miswak tree, Salvadora persica. This is found in the Kutch area of Gujarat at many places of Rajasthan. So such plants which grows in the soils where the concentration of the different salts in the soil it is more. These plants are called as dry land halophytes. So this is one more group of the ecological group of the plants. So this is introduction to what different types of the ecological grouping of the plants is there. Heterophytes are there, xerophytes are there, mesophytes are there, which grows in moderate situation epiphytes are there, and halophytes are there. Halophytes means the plants growing in salt-rich water or salt-rich soils. Now today we are going to discuss about hydrophytes. Today we are going to discuss about the hydrophytes. What different morphological and internal adaptations the hydrophyte they shows. So we have to discuss about the hydrophytes. Now before discussing with the hydrophytes, let us try to know what are the hydrophytes. Phytes means the plants, hydro means the water. The plants growing in the water or water-rich soil or a substratum or very wet places, moist places, the plants are called hydrophytes. Plants which are living in water or wet places are called hydrophytes. According to their relation to the water and air, they are subdivided into following categories. For example, the first type is called free floating hydrophytes. Certain plants or aquatic plants float on the water. These are called free floating hydrophytes. Now, some plants are rooted in the water body. They are called rooted floating hydrophytes. Whereas certain plants, they are totally submerged in the water. They are totally sinked in the water body. They are not seen above. They are totally sinked below. They are called submerged. Now certain hydrophytes, they shows they are rooted and submerged. So the third type which we submerged type which we are discussed is submerged and floating hydrophyte. They are not rooted, whereas certain are submerged and they are rooted. For example, hydrilla, it is rooted at the bottom of the pond in the mud, and it is also submerged. It do not comes above the level of water, surface of the water. This is called as the fourth type, rooted submerged hydrophyte. For example, hydrilla. Now, the fifth type of hydrophytes are called amphibious hydrophytes. For example, your typha plant, Pancanis plant, which we get in our river, Mula river, typha plant, Pancanis plant, it is called amphibious, not in fully in the water and not above, out of the water body. It grows in a moist, swampy, wet water-rich substratum. This is called as amphibious nature, just like the frog. Frog lives on the land and also live in the water. So just like the frog, physiological situation, physiological adaptability to live in the water and on the soil, these amphibious plants, they may grow in the water, or they also grows nicely along the bank of the water where the substratum is moist. So depending upon the position where in an aquatic body the aquatic plants are growing, these are 5 different categories of hydrophytes: free floating hydrophytes, rooted floating hydrophytes, submerged floating hydrophytes, rooted submerged hydrophytes, and amphibious hydrophytes. So this is about the different types of the hydrophyte depending upon the location in the water body where they are growing. For example, this is image showing the hydrophytic plant. For example, over here, this is Eichhornia plant, water hyacinth plant, Eichhornia plant. Over here, this is wrongly labeled as Pistia. This is wrongly labeled as Pistia. The Pistia plant this is the Pistia plant, and this is Eichhornia plant. So it should be corrected. It should be corrected. So this Eichhornia is a floating hydrophyte. So floating hydrophyte, for example, we see this Eichhornia growing very nicely in the Bhima river, close to the Siddhatek. And when we go to Pune, in Mola and Motha River, this Eichhornia water hyacinth green plant floats on the very polluted, dirty water released from the Pune Municipal Corporation. So this is about the Eichhornia floating hydrophytes. Now besides the Eichhornia, the Pistia, this is the Pistia plant. This is also free-floating hydrophyte. This is also free-floating hydrophytes. In addition, here there are two more images of rooted floating hydrophytes. For example, this is Marsilia over here. This plant is also found in our college campus, where the water accumulates in the rainy season in the ponds, the closed lake. This plant grows there in the shallow water beaches where the water is accumulated. The basal part is in the water and the certain leaves are floating on the surface of water. Leaves are floating on the surface of water. Now beside this, our campus also shows the Nymphaea plant, lotus plant. This is a lotus plant grown in the pond which we have made. Pond which we have made. Now beside this, these are some more images over here. Submerged floating hydrophytes. For example, over here, this is Ceratophyllum. This is submerged floating hydrophytes. This is sinked in the water body, but it is not rooted. It is free floating, submerged, floating. Float means it is freely flowing in the water. Free. It is not rooted. Ceratophyllum. It is called as Ceratophyllum. Now, beside this Utricularia, this is one more plant. Utricularia. This is insectivorous plant, aquatic plant growing in the water body in the form of submerged and non-rooted, freely suspended in the water body. Now, beside this, the lower two images are of rooted submerged hydrophytes. This is hydrilla over here. As we have discussed, it is rooted. It is rooted in the mud, and the above portion is freely floating in the water. So this is rooted at the bottom, and the rest of the body is suspended in the water. So rooted submerged hydrophyte, hydrilla. Now besides this, there is one more example over here, Vallisneria. This is Vallisneria plant. This is also rooted in the mud at the bottom of the pond or lake, and the ribbon-like leaves are freely floating. Now beside this, here to view us, here the fifth type of the plant, rooted emergent hydrophytes. Rooted emergent hydrophytes. For example, the first type is Sagittaria. This is Sagittaria. Sagittaria means its leaves are just like arrow. The leaves are arrow-shaped, and due to the arrow-like shape of the leaves, this is arrow-like shape of the leaves. This is arrow-like shape of the leaves, and due to the arrow-like shape, this plant have the generic name Sagittaria. This plant have the generic name Sagittaria. Now, beside this rooted emergent, rooted at the bottom, and half of the body is coming above the water, and therefore it is called emergent, coming above the level of water. So this is called as rooted emergent. Rooted at the bottom, half of the body is there in the water, and some part of the plant body is above the level of water. We call it as emergent. For example, the Sagittaria is the plant. Now, beside this, there is a second more example is over here, ranunculus. Half of the body of the ranunculus is there, submerged in the water. This part is below the level of water, and this part is above the level of water. So this is called as rooted emergent hydrophytes. Now, this rooted emergent hydrophyte, this shows heterophily. Hetero means different, phily means the plants. So two different types of the leaves are seen in a single plant. For example, over here in Sagittaria, the submerged leaves are ribbon-like, long, very long and ribbon-like, whereas the emergent leaves, which comes above the level of water, they are arrow-shaped. They are arrow-like. Same is the case with the ranunculus over here. This ranunculus also shows the submerged leaves. These are the submerged leaves which are dissected. These are dissected, and these are the aerial leaves. These are the aerial emergent leaves which are different from the submerged leaves. So this is called as a heterophily. Hetero means different, and phily means leaves. Different types of the leaves are developed by a single plant. Half of the body living in the water shows one type of leaf, and half of the body above the level of water shows different type of the leaves. So this is about the heterophilous nature. This is about the heterophilous nature of the leaves seen in the aquatic plants. Now the hydrophytes, these plants which can grow in moist, damp, and shady places are called hydrophytes. So this is what definition of the hydrophytes. Now these hydrophytic plants, they shows certain morphological adaptations in them which helps them to grow nicely, beautifully, luxuriantly in the aquatic bodies, water-rich bodies. Now, morphological adaptations or external permanent changes or uh, adaptations developed in the hydrophytes. For example, in the roots, how the roots of these hydrophytes they are. The function of the root is to absorb the water and minerals from the soil, from the medium where the plant is growing. These plants they directly grow in the water, so therefore it is not necessary to them to develop very nicely type of the root system. So therefore, in these plants, the roots are totally absent. Roots are roots are very poorly developed, or sometimes they are totally absent. For example, in Ulpia and Salvinia, the roots are totally absent. What the plant directly grows in the water, so it is not necessary to develop the very nice type of root system in these plants, and therefore roots are absent. Or when they are present, they are very poorly developed. Roots are very poorly developed. For example, in hydrilla, the roots are just like the threads, just like the threads. Roots are just like the threads, they are not much branched. Or in very rare cases, the roots are well developed. For example, in ranunculus like plant, they are developed. The root caps are replaced by root pockets, for example, Eichhornia. For example, Eichhornia. Now we have seen the image of Eichhornia over here. This we have seen the image of Eichhornia. This is Eichhornia. Now this plant shows the root pockets over here. These plants they show the balloon-like root pockets, which helps this plant to float on the surface of water, just like a boat. Just like a boat, the root pockets help these plants to float on the surface of the water. So this is about the what are the root pockets? Root pockets are balloon-like, helping the plant body to float on the surface of water. For example, in water hyacinth, we called it as Eichhornia plant. Jalaparni plant, for example, Siddhateg and Mula Mutha river of Pune, where in the black, very polluted, dirty water released from the municipal corporation, this Eichhornia plant is freely floating on the surface with the help of these root pockets. So this is all about the adaptations in the root of hydrophytes. the roots are absent or they are very poorly developed. Very poorly developed. So this adaptation is as per the requirement. We generally, we sometimes coin the phrase, necessity is the mother of invention. If we have a need, we develop it. If we have the need, we develop. Now these plants, they don't have the need of well developed roots because they directly grows in the water. Nutrients are also present in the water body, and the whole plant body absorb the water and minerals. The leaves, stem, all organs of the body absorb the water, and therefore it is not necessary to these plants to develop nice root system. So therefore roots are poorly developed, or sometimes in many cases the roots are totally absent, and if they are present they help the plant body to float on surface, just like the balloons or root pockets helping to float on the surface of water. So this is according to the principle, necessity is the mother of invention. There is no requirement, there is no development. So root system is poorly developed or roots are totally absent. Now, just like the root, we have to discuss about the what adaptations are seen in the stem. Now these plants they grow in the water body, and we see the water body. Water body shows the water currents. Water body shows the wavy action of water. Water body shows the wavy action of the water. Water currents are there. Sometimes in at certain water bodies the water is in a flowing stage, and therefore to have the body flexible, these plants they shows a slender flexible stem. The stem is slender, it is spongy, and it is elastic or it is flexible. So along with the water currents, water body, the body should be flexible. Body should be flexible. So to have this nature of flexibility, these aquatic plants they show the sponge-like, spongy, soft, delicate body, which flex bends as per the movement of the water, wavy action of the water. So the stem is slender, flexible, spongy, and weak. It is not hard. Now, in free floating forms, the stem is thick, short, stoloniferous, and a sponge with the nodes and internodes, and it is very thick, short, balloon like. And whereas in the rooted floating forms, it is rhizome. For example, in Taipa plant, Pancanis plant, which we see in the Mula River, these plants they shows rhizome, just like our rhizome of our kardal plant, rhizome of our sugarcane plant. These plants, amphibious plants, and certain rooted floating forms, they shows rhizome like stem. So this is all about the morphological adaptations in the stems of the hydrophytes. So we have to remember these uh, peculiar words. The stems are long, slender, spongy, flexible, weak, soft, delicate. These are the this is the nature of the stem of the hydrophytes, and it is as per the aquatic situation, aquatic climatic future aquatic body, to match with the aquatic body, to match with the physical and mechanical nature of the aquatic body. The stem is built up. So this is about the morphological adaptations in the stem. Now, the next organ is morphological adaptations or external adaptations in the leaves of the hydrophytes. Now, these plants they grow in the water body. The aquatic plant, the hydrophyte, they grows in the water. So the leaves have to remain in the water body, and therefore these plant they develops very thin, long, ribbon-like leaves. For example, just we have seen Sagittaria. The submerged leaves are ribbon-like. Submerged leaves are belt-like, ribbon-like, very long. Same is the case with hydrilla. Hydrilla leaves are very thin and ribbon-like, reduced, long, very peppery and thin. Now, so this is about the nature of the leaves in hydrophytes. They are thin, long, ribbon-like, ribbon shaped in Vallisneria and Sagittaria, submerged leaves in Sagittaria. They are linear in Potamogeton. This is one of the hydrophyte. Or they are finely dissected, for example, in Ceratophyllum. Whereas in the floating hydrophytes, for example, our lotus, Nymphaea, leaves are very broad and large. They float on the surface of water. Nymphaea, Nelumbo, or lotus-like plants, these plants they shows very broader floating leaves on surface of water. In Eucornia and Trappa, petiole becomes swollen and spongy. Now, the Eucornia, water hyacinth, Jalaperni plant, which we have seen just Eucornia, this plant, their petiole becomes very swollen, balloon-like, spongy, and this swollen, spongy petiole of Eucornia is characteristic. It also helps to float on the surface of water. Now, in emergent forms, the leaves shows heterophyly. Hetero means different and phyly means the plants. The submerged leaves are dissected and aerial leaves are entire. Heterophyly means the leaves which are below the level of water are dissected. Why they are dissected? The dissected leaves cope up with the flowing water streams. The wavy action of what is tackled, and the dissected threads like leaves helps the water bodies, water to flow there and the plant to stand there. Whereas the aerial leaves are entire. Aerial leaves are entire, they are not dissected. So this is about the morphological adaptations in the hydrophytes. Over here, their examples are mentioned over here. Ranunculus, Limnophila, Sagittaria. These are the examples of the hydrophytes. Now after this, we have to study over here the internal adaptations, anatomical adaptations in the hydrophytes. Anatomical adaptations in the hydrophytes. Now, anatomical adaptations, 5-6 anatomical adaptations are seen. For example, the first anatomical adaptation is about the protective covering of the body, skin of the body. We call it as epidermis. Now, this epidermis is to perform the function of protection. The epidermis is deposited with the extra coating on it. The extra coating we call it as a cuticle. Extra coating we call it as a cuticle. So this cuticle is absent in the aquatic plants. So this cuticle thus deposited on the epidermis of the plant bodies. For example, in the land plants, the plant body should not be desiccated, dried by the solar radiations. The epidermis protect the plant body from heating effect or desiccation from the solar radiations. So epidermis is deposited with the extra coat, protective kavach on it. We call it as a cuticle. Now such extra cuticle coating, it is not required in the water body, because the plants growing in the water, they do not thrive this stress. Just that the land plant they faces the stress of desiccation due to the radiation, the stress of drying due to the solar radiations, So there is no this type of stress in the water plants, and therefore the cuticle is absent in the aquatic plant. So this is first anatomical adaptation. This is a first anatomical adaptation. Cuticle is absent. Now, beside this, there is a single layer of epidermis is present. There is a single layer of the epidermis. Epidermis is made up of one row, uniseriate row of the cells. So, uniseriate single layer of epidermis is present. This is also anatomical adaptation. Now, if you compare these heterophytes with the xerophyte they shows multiple epidermis. Xerophyte they show the one layer, second layer, third layer, fourth layer. Such multiple layers are there in xerophytes. Whereas over here, there in the hydrophytes, the epidermis is made up of single epidermis is uniseriate. There is one row of the cells composing the epidermis. So this is second anatomical internal adaptation. This is the second anatomical internal adaptation. Now, beside this, below the epidermis and hypodermis, there is a region of cortex. Now, this cortex is made up of parenchyma type of the cells. These parenchyma, they shows a spongy, very loose arrangement and very larger cavities in it. The larger air chambers cavities thus present in the cortical parenchyma. These cavities, air chambers, locule are called as arrhynchyma. Arrhynchyma means the vacuole, these spaces, air chambers, stores the air, which helps the plant body to become spongy and light in the wet to float in the water body, like freely suspended or on the top of the water body. The plant body should be floated like a balloon, like a boat, and therefore and to have the spongy body, these air chambers, locules are present in the cortical region. Now we will see this nature of the parenchyma in the figure later on. So this is third anatomical adaptation. The cortex shows air chambers, air vacuoles, cavities called parenchyma. Now, there is one more anatomical adaptation about the vascular tissues. Vascular tissues being the conducting tissues which conduct the water and translocate the food. Water translocating tissues are the xylem elements. Xylem conducting element, tube-like capillaries. So conducting elements in these hydrophytic plants, they are reduced or they are poorly developed. These conducting vascular elements conduct the water, but these plants they grow directly there in the water, so they do not require much conducting elements. So just we have pronounced the phrase necessity is the mother of development or invention. These plants do not require much of the conducting capillaries, tubes, pipelines to conduct the water because they directly grow in the water. So therefore, the conducting elements or vascular tissues are very littly developed or scantily developed or poorly developed. So this is very important anatomical internal adaptations of the hydrophytes. The conducting tissues or vascular tissues are poorly developed or they are very reduced, we can call. Now beside this, about the mechanical tissues. The mechanical tissues gives the mechanical strength to the body, makes the body very strong, rigid, tough, and these plants they grow in the water, so therefore their body should not be tough, it should be flexible, it should be smooth, it should be easily bendable, and therefore it should have the elastic nature, it should bend, it should flex, and therefore to have such a flexibility, flexible nature, bending nature elastic nature, these aquatic plants, they shows no development of the mechanical tissues, or mechanical tissues are very reduced, or mechanical tissues are generally absent. Mechanical tissues are generally absent, or mechanical tissues which makes the body strong, rigid, strengthful. Such mechanical strength supportive tissues are absent, or they are very reduced in the hydrophytes. Now, for example, over here, this is very beautiful colored diagram of hydrilla stem showing internal adaptations or anatomical adaptation. Now, first anatomical adaptation, as we have discussed, this is epidermis. This epidermis is not coated with the cuticle, so cuticle is absent. This is first anatomical adaptation. Over here, there is no cuticle, absence of cuticle. This is the first anatomical adaptation. Now, the second anatomical adaptation which we have discussed is epidermis is present in a one layer. Epidermis is present in the uniseriate row. There is one row of the cells composing this epidermis. So this is green is the epidermis, and the cells are radially elongated. So this is a characteristic type of nature of the epidermal cells, that they are radially elongated like this. Suppose one cell is like this, second cell is like this, third cell is like this, fourth cell is like this. This is called as radially elongated epidermal cells. One cell is like this, and close to it, the second cell is like this. This is called as radially elongated epidermal cells. These radially elongated epidermal cells helps the plant body to avoid the compression of the plant body in the water body. Where these plant stems are present in the deep in the water body, and therefore the lateral pressure compresses the stem, and the stem should not be compressed, and therefore the epidermal cells are radially elongated. Suppose in this way, the water body exerts a compression pressure on the stem, and to face with the lateral pressure of surrounding medium water, the epidermal cells, such as their radial arrangement of the epidermal cells, resist the lateral pressure of water. Such a lateral pressure of water. Compression is resisted. So this act as the radially elongated cells act as the strong peripheral cell around this stem. So this is about the epidermis. Second anatomical internal adaptation in the hydrophytes. Now, beside the third anatomical adaptation which we have pronounced is the air chamber, the parenchyma. This is a region of cortex. This cortex region should be solid, but over here, instead of solid nature, compact nature, this cortex is made up of loose lacunas over here, loose chambers are there, cavities are there. These cavities are called air chambers or parenchyma. Now, this gives a spongy nature to the stem. This gives a spongy nature, or such parenchyma are helpful for buoyancy purpose of the stem. Buoyancy means for floating, to have the body weight light in the weight. These parenchyma storing the air in it works like a balloon in the water bodies. So this is about the parenchyma, air chambers, storing the air with oxygen and carbon dioxide, helpful for respiration and photosynthesis. So this is subsidiary. This is the second role of the parenchyma is, in addition to the floating, the air stored also helps for respiration and photosynthesis. CO2 stored in the air chamber help for photosynthesis, and oxygen stored in the air chamber help for the respiration. But the main function of the air chambers is to have the body weight light and to float in the water body. Air chambers, parenchyma present in the cortex are helpful. So this is important anatomical adaptation in the hydrophytes, presence of the air chambers. Now, in addition, the vascular tissues, they are very reduced. For example, this is a single capillary. This is a single capillary in the center. This is a conducting tissue. This is a conducting tissue. It is a pipe-like. It is pipe-like. This is a transverse section. We have cutted the stem in this way, and therefore this tube appears round in the section. This tube appears round in the section. This is a tube-like. This is a pipe-like or tube-like. We have cutted the transverse section, and therefore this tube appears over here just like this. This tube appears over here like a tube, like a round outline in the center. This is a round outline where the capillary tube-like structure conducting pipe have cut it and appearing like round in the outline. So this is a xylem cavity. This is the xylem or conducting vascular tissue. This is a xylem cavity conducting the water. It is reduced. It is represented by a single vessel. Only one vessel is there. Whereas in the land plant, uncountable number of xylem capillaries are there, pipelines are there, capillaries are there for conduction of water, because those plants require them to have more in number, and therefore they are there in those plants. Over here, this plant do not require so much conducting vascular tissues, therefore the xylem is reduced to 1. Number of xylem elements are reduced, and it is represented over here by a single capillary which have cut it in the transverse plane, appearing round in the outline in our transverse section. So this is about the vascular tissues. Now the last anatomical internal adaptation is this whole stem shows no mechanical tissues in it. Mechanical tissues are reduced or they are not developed at all, because these plant requires no mechanical strength, and therefore body is very soft. To have the body soft, delicate, flexible, mechanical tissues are not developed. Or they are reduced or they are absent. So this is how all these are the anatomical adaptations in the hydrophytes. This is a colored diagram. And over here and over here, this is over here. Over here, this is black and white diagram over here. Now you can sketch one of either this or this. Both the figures are the same. Showing all internal adaptations. Now, this is all about the definition of the hydrophytes, the types of the hydrophytes, the morphological adaptations in the hydrophytes, and internal or anatomical adaptations in the hydrophytes. Taking the section of the hydrilla stem, we have discussed the internal adaptations seen in the hydrophytes. Now, to support the internal adaptations, this figure is essential. Either this or this figure it should be sketched. And to support the external adaptations, one has to sketch the morphological figure of morphology showing external features, the figure of either hydrilla, sagittaria, Vallisneria, or any other image which you have seen in this in these PPTs, for morphological adaptations, we have to sketch one of the figures showing morphological features. So this is all about hydrophytes. So if you have any doubts regarding the hydrophytes, you can ask me. Dhanyavad.